On the banks of the River Danube between Croatia and Serbia lies a small patch of disputed land, technically unclaimed by either state. 2 years ago, a teenager from Melbourne declared it the world's newest de facto state, establishing the Free Republic of Verdis. Its founder and self-declared president, Daniel Jackson, now 20 years old, says Verdis is a sovereign state, a humanitarian hub built on terra nullius, meaning land claimed by no one. In October 2023, the project made global headlines when Croatian police forcibly removed Jackson and his team from the site, detaining and deporting them. Since then, he's run Verdis in exile from Dover in the United Kingdom as his group pursues legal action against Croatia and campaigns for international recognition. When we last had the privilege of speaking with Daniel Jackson in March 2024, he told us about Verdis's humanitarian missions in Ukraine, its provisional government, and its dream of becoming a neutral state for aid and cooperation. Today, 18 months on, we sit down again to ask what's changed, how Verdis survives without its land, and what the future of this would-be microstate might hold. I'm Wilkinson Cox, and this is Europinion in conversation with Daniel Jackson. Daniel, thank you for joining us again at Europinion. When we last spoke, you were just 19 years old. Now you're 20 and still running Verdis from exile. Let's start with a simple question. What's changed since then? Where does Verdis stand today?
Well, I would say quite a lot has changed. I think over the past few months, as you may have seen, we've recently hit quite a lot of media attention again. We raised about 70,000 euros in a single week through crowdfunding. We opened an office in the UK, and we're also now soon looking at opening one in Belgrade. I think there's probably been the biggest change since the destruction of the settlements over the past few months that have really brought Verdis forwards, especially in terms of the media and support from politicians, entrepreneurs. Quite a lot has changed in that regard, and we're still operating quite well in exile.
Brilliant. And so when we last spoke, you said that support was growing. And recent reports have now suggested that Verdis now has around 400 e-citizens from over 15,000 applications. I was wondering, how accurate are those figures still?
So when it comes to citizens, we don't refer to them as e-citizens. They are full-fledged citizens of the Free Republic of Verdis. Once we are back on the land, they can exercise their right to abode. Their right of abode in Verdis. Although we do have about 1,000 e-residents now. E-residents are basically Verdis's pathway to citizenship program or digital access program, where you can access a bunch of services and discounts through Verdis's government partners. Or again, if you're a Plus member, you can begin your pathway towards citizenship. So we have about 1,000 of those, about 700, 800 of which have become e-residents over the past 2 months alone, which have raised Verdis about £30,000 through that program in recent months. But when it comes to the applications, so the 15,000 applications for citizenship, that number is quite old, and that was a number from before we started the e-residency program. I'd say the e-residency program is what makes up Verdis's true figures at the moment, and everyone who has applied for e-residency has paid a fee to get involved, whereas the initial 15,000 application process was just a basic form, and that's why most people weren't accepted, because we ever since then we've tightened down on things, and we want everything to be quite a rigorous process.
Brilliant. And so Verdis sort of began, especially when we spoke last time, you were elucidating on Verdis's humanitarian commitments and kind of this humanitarian project with aid to Ukraine and support for NGOs. I wondered, how has your mission evolved in the past 18 months?
I would say when it comes to humanitarian aid, it has unfortunately been on a bit of a back burner, as our priority is to develop Verdis and keep it operational. I think that it's governing the country has of course made time limited in order for us to focus on our humanitarian missions. We would like to restart them again very soon, and we are in discussions with a few charities looking to partner up and start providing aid again. But I think as well, it's very important for us to be very careful on where we step with this, because we're between two countries that have very different views. And because of that, if we start providing aid to one region, such as Ukraine again, it could anger one of our neighbors. It could cause more issues in the broader world. We would have to try and provide humanitarian aid without showing any look of bias or anything.
And going to these kinds of let's call them legal and diplomatic issues, perhaps. The Guardian recently reported that Croatia had installed cameras and stepped up monitoring around Verdis. Is this effectively a blockade? Do you have any realistic pathway back to the land?
Oh, it absolutely is a blockade. It's a full-scale blockade. The cameras, if the police aren't in Verdis, which they usually are, the cameras, if you're even floating around the waters, the police will be there within about 10-15 minutes. The other month, Verdis's foreign minister visited Verdesian waters with a bunch of Serbian journalists on a boat, and the Croatian police actually immediately turned towards the boat as it entered Verdis's waters and actually tried to ram the vessel to capsize it. And they managed to just get away by crossing from the Verdesian side to the Serbian side of the border before police quickly turned back and docked themselves back in on Verdis's coast. Fortunately, you know, this is an issue that's constantly ongoing, and as you've probably seen in the media, I've also been chased again recently by Croatian police. This is what we consider to be an illegal blockade, because even to this day, Croatia is very clear that Verdis is not part of Croatia. And while we aren't very happy with what Croatia is doing and, you know, their behaviors at the moment, we do hope that eventually they will, we do believe that they will eventually respect Verdis's territorial integrity, and the sooner the better, because we want to have good relations with them. We want to have good border cooperation with them. We want to get along with our neighbors. But again, you know, we aren't very happy in regards to their recent behaviors, where they were putting our foreign minister and the journalists visiting, they were effectively putting their lives at risk. And you can actually see that in the media. I believe it was Radar magazine in Serbia that posted about it. They posted a few photos of the situation as well.
Interesting. And kind of to zoom in on this Danubian dispute between Serbia and Croatia, you've been collaborating with another microstate that is heavily involved in the Danubian island dispute, that of Liberland, and pursuing legal action against Croatia. And I wanted to know, what is the status of these efforts? Have you filed any formal cases? And if so, has Croatia responded in any capacity?
So when it comes to legal cases, a lot of that is done in collaboration with Liberland, especially a large amount of it at the moment is focused on the way that they're treating settlers or former settlers and so on. We have some people who are willing to, like, for example, the other month, one of our settlers who were detained with me and, you know, some others when we were taken into Croatia, he was actually harassed by Spanish border control just over the fact there was some sort of observation that informed them about his, you know, his status as being a settler in Verdis. It seems that Croatia has put a weird mark on that on us in regards to that, and Liberland has been open to effectively take these sort of cases on board and help us. I think when it comes to the legal issues, I'm not sure how much I can mention publicly at the moment, because it's, you know, it's all a little bit complicated. But we are trying to basically exhaust all resources in Croatia at the moment so that we can take it to, say, for example, the ECHR and see what they could potentially say. I think the biggest issue that we have, though, is with Croatia, they're completely non-compliant at the moment. There was an issue in Liberland a while ago where one of their visitors had his I think it was his neck broken, or something along the lines of that, and effectively they took it to court in Croatia, and the Croatian police who broke the gentleman's neck got away with it because the judge threw out the case saying it technically didn't happen in Croatia, even though it was their police force. So we're having quite a lot of issues around this, you know, and obviously whatever happens with Liberland also happens with us as well. So it's a complicated situation. Croatia won't address anything at the moment. They won't even respond to journalists from large news outlets, anything like that. They're on the complete public relations run. So it is unfortunate, but we do hope, you know, that these issues will be further addressed and Croatia will be pressured to respond more soon.
Yeah. And when we last spoke and in the press, you've described relations with Serbia as more positive. And I wondered, has there been any formal dialogue or movement on that front since our last conversation?
We are in contact with a number of Serbian politicians. When it comes to formal dialogue, I'm not sure how much can be said publicly again. I think the issue is a lot of countries are reluctant to state if they're communicating with Verdis publicly or even recognize Verdis because they're worried about how their relations could be impacted with Croatia. I think that Croatians do well, I think that a lot of countries are, of course, they don't want their trade impacted. They don't want to have their ambassadors recalled over a country that they recognize that doesn't bring any much benefit to them yet. So I think, we have had a lot of discussions behind closed doors with many, undisclosed governments. Some of them have basically said that once the blockade has been lifted, we should be able to, gain recognition from them. It will effectively be a bit of a domino effect from what we've seen. But when it comes to our relations with Serbia, Serbia doesn't have a problem. I think they still distant a little bit from our behaviors, but we are in contact with a number of Serbian politicians, activists, and also influencers from there. And as you know, I usually hop back to Serbia every second month.
Brilliant. And now to move over slightly to nation building and logistics. I think this begs the question, how are you funding all of this now? Is crowdfunding still the main engine, or are there some investors that have engaged or re-engaged? How are you funding the Free Republic of Verdis?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of ways that Verdis is being funded at the moment. A lot of it is through crowdfunding as well. As I mentioned, a while ago, we raised 70,000 euros in a single week, just through crowdfunding, which has been absolutely excellent in regards to boosting Verdis's development, and this was as a result of the media attention that we had recently gained around the world. We of course also have other funding initiatives. So we have citizenship by investment, although that is very limiting and it's a case-by-case basis. We don't have a specific minimum amount that citizens invest, but it usually does end up being quite hefty. We don't make the investments sort of like what St. Kitts prices are, because again, we do lack an international recognition, but a lot of people are willing to invest and take that risk in case Verdis gets recognized sooner than people expect. So that's also helped a lot in regards to our funding. And also we of course have fees and everything, so when people request passports and stuff, the state does make a little bit of profit to reinvest. And of course we have the Verdis's e-residency program, which of course has been a massive driving factor in regards to how we've been funding ourselves quite a lot recently outside of crowdfunding and so on. And basically our e-residency program, there's the plus version, which is like a pathway to citizenship, and we have the basic version, which is a bit cheaper, and you get an ID card, and you basically have access to a lot of digital services or discounts with the e-residency program partners. So that's really helped as well in regards to a lot of funding. I mean, over the past, I think it was 2 or 3 days, we've made about £2,500 just through that program alone. So it's something that's massively driving Verdis's a state economy right now.
And yeah, you plan to house up to 10,000 citizens once using modular structures, I remember from our last conversation. Now, with settlements suspended, what's the new roadmap for infrastructure, population, and economy? I know you've elucidated slightly on the economy section, but yes, what is the roadmap for infrastructure, population, and economy?
Yeah. So when it comes to population, of course, we're waiting for the blockade to be released. If the blockade did theoretically release tomorrow, like if it was lifted tomorrow, we would be more than prepared already to be back on the land straight away. We're already preparing quite a lot of assets. We still have prefabricated infrastructure sitting in Serbia ready to be moved over. We still have access to some vessels and so on. That being said as well, when it comes to, say, for example, law enforcement and border control, we are working to build that up. We have a lot of those softwares and systems already in place to make sure that Verdis immediately has a functioning justice system. When we do get back on the land, it's the number one priority to, of course, put in some infrastructure that's comfortable as we prepare to build more permanent infrastructure. So houseboats and so on will likely help quite a bit. And we believe that, over time, as we build more permanent infrastructure, we should be able to host tourists as well, which would, in effect, definitely help Verdis's economy. But it's all a long process, and after all of this has happened, after Verdis has been further recognized, we've built up Verdis's economy and infrastructure more. We will look into drafting a new constitution, which will be put into a vote. Once that's been voted in, and that will determine how Verdis will be further governed in the future. We then plan to have elections, and then once elections have been complete, obviously the new government will take over. I don't plan to run in the next elections. I plan to live as a normal citizen in Verdis after they have been completed.
Brilliant. Well, before we move on to recognition and kind of political vision, I have just one question that sprung to mind. You talked of these softwares that would enable you to say that you were to gain recognition tomorrow, to set up a justice system. I wondered if you could elucidate on that for me.
Yeah, so of course, we have basically, criminal databases, everything like that that's ready to go. We still own our own servers. We have a company that we call Verdis Host, which basically holds a lot of that data for us. And we also, of course, have border control systems. All of that's basically up and ready to make sure that, everything's properly logged when we're back on the land. And, there's no, we want to minimize any risk of, say, for example, abuse of power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Brilliant. So on to recognition, because I think this is a major sticking point. International recognition is still the holy grail for micronations. What are Verdis's realistic next steps? Have any states, organizations, or diplomats shown serious interest since 2024? I know that you've also had this kind of media run as well. You spoke with The Guardian, for example, very recently. I wondered, has there been any kind of movement in recognition from this media run as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think that when it comes to the past few months of Verdis gaining a lot of international attention, we've of course had loads of NGOs, loads of just individuals, and some people loosely linked with some other governments and so on, reaching out to us, expressing their support. And you can find a bit of that online. Some people, some politicians reposting about Verdis and so on, which, of course, it's not officially an endorsement, but, we do reach out to a lot of them back. And we are making quite a bit of progress in that regard. We are a bit careful as well, though, in regards to how public we can be about it, because I think, again, we don't want to do anything that will damage the relationship of NGOs with Croatia, or again, governments with Croatia, because and I think that's, they expect the same, because again, they don't want their ambassadors recalled, they don't want their trade affected, and until Croatia can calm down and lift the blockade, I think a lot of people will still be reluctant to go public. But we are speaking with more and more people behind the scenes, and you can see a lot of those accounts that are now following us, a lot of politicians, which is excellent as well, just on the fact that we do have, a bit of support, whether that's open doors or behind closed doors. We think it'll be quite good in regards to when the blockade is lifted. But again, we do hope that more politicians do go public about it, because even though it can cause, a negative effect with their relations with Croatia, potentially, it's a way of showing that they're respecting of international law, and they want to stand on that ground instead of just wanting to remain positive with both entities. I think it would be good for them to go public and show their true colors, on that they do stand with international law and Verdis's right to the claim.
Yeah, and I think one question that kind of springs to mind for me is, we live in very testing times. I think polarization across the world is pressing, but particularly in Eastern Europe. And I wonder, does Verdis run the risk of being utilized as a pawn in other kind of political games and machinations? Has there been anything to that effect that you've seen? Because you said that you're careful, you obviously don't want to upset relations with NGOs within Croatia and within Serbia. Is there a risk that perhaps politicians could utilize or exploit the Verdesian issue for their own ends and purposes that perhaps aren't in line with your own?
Yeah, this is definitely something that we've been concerned about before, and I think this is also why we are a little bit reluctant to go public about specific politicians that support us, because we don't want it to look like an endorsement. We appreciate their support, of course, but again, Verdis is a neutral state, so we can't endorse other politicians' policies and so on. It wouldn't go in line with Verdis's values, but we do appreciate their support nonetheless. But we've always made it sure that Verdis as a state can't be exploited by other politicians for them to build support. And the same goes for some NGOs. Unless they have a very good reputational background, we won't publicly support NGOs until they make very clear what their policies are and so on.
Mm-hmm. And so Verdis, as we know, defines itself as kind of centrist and humanitarian. How do you maintain that ideological neutrality as Verdis grows? And what values now define a Verdesian identity?
Yeah, so we still, of course, a humanitarian state. We're still a neutral state. I think neutrality is a massive factor of what makes us humanitarian. Obviously, there's people just all over, Verdis, and of course, I myself have my own political opinions on certain matters. But I think that we all come to the table on the fact that when it comes to putting political matters aside, our goal with Verdis is that we have, a massive humanitarian background, and we just want to make the world a bit of a better place. And I think that also plays a big part in Verdesian identity. That's what a lot of people have become citizens for. Not only that, but they've also become citizens, of course, to make history, to start a new life. There's a lot of reasons for why Verdis exists today, and I think that the best word that we look for is Verdis is quite big tent, while also maintaining its core values, which is neutrality and being humanitarian. And hopefully, we can restart our aid missions and so on soon. It's just that we want to make sure that when we do restart those missions, we don't have any display of bias or anything. Anywhere that we provide aid is not out of favor for anyone. It's out of favor over anyone else. It's solely just aid, for the civilians. Yeah.
And so to kind of hone in on the culture, I have a few questions on this angle. I mean, one of them is more, I wanted to ascertain, you spoke recently about hopes for Verdis to enter Eurovision one day. And I wondered, to what extent is that a genuine ambition or playful symbolism?
I think when it came to, I know The Guardian did put that as their title. It was only a brief question, and they seemed to turn it out to be their title. It's obviously not a priority for us. It would be very intriguing, but again, it would take us so long to be able to ever even be eligible. We would have to be further recognized. We would have to be a member of the EBU, to which we need, to have a state radio station. All of that would need to be done and functioning within Verdis's land itself. I think in the long term, it would definitely be intriguing. It might not be done under my government. It might be done under the next elected government, but it's not a serious it's not a serious priority right now. But I think as well, we do have quite a lot of support from people involved in Eurovision. Say, for example, Luke Black, which is Serbia's Eurovision singer from 2023. He's been quite vocal in regards to his support about Verdis. And he's also, there is an upcoming article with another large outlet coming out in a few days that he has been our Serbian voice again. And he's, we do have quite a few connections with those groups, and, hopefully that will help us in the future in regards to getting closer with people, with the people involved in running Eurovision. But this is, of course, again, this is a long-term thing, and it may not happen under my government. It's not a priority. We have we have to direct our funds to elsewhere, to where Verdis is getting international recognition. But it definitely would be interesting in the future.
It's interesting. So you say about this Serbian artist who represented Serbia for Eurovision has kind of been a helping hand, if you will. This kind of leads me on to a question I asked you a bit earlier. But to what extent is this Serbian support genuine for the recognition of Verdis, or could it be a proxy in the dispute with Croatia?
I don't think that they necessarily care in regards to the borders. They're happy with the status quo in regards to they control every bit of the land that they claim, whereas Croatia does not. So I think that when it comes to Serbia, it's a matter that just isn't that important to them, unfortunately, at the moment. When it comes to younger people in Serbia, I think younger people are quite supportive of Verdis because it can bring a boost of tourism to the region, or you bring a use of services, in regions that are near to Verdis. But I think as well, though, that being said, we do have quite a lot of issues with nationalist groups there, unfortunately. And we also have a lot of problems with, say, for example, very conservative politicians in Serbia. So I think, and that goes for Croatia as well. And I think that that's one of the reasons for the blockade. It's on both sides in regards to, very stubborn, conservative and nationalist politicians, unfortunately, do cause a bit of an issue with Verdis's development. And I think that itself sort of shows that we aren't a proxy of anything. We have our own views. We're neutral. We don't lean towards Serbia. We don't lean towards Croatia. We want to have good relations with both states as best as possible.
So you've mentioned threats from ultra-nationalist Serbian groups and online harassment before and just now. Has this escalated, stabilized, or would you say it's kind of morphed into something new? since we last spoke?
I think it's escalated a little bit, obviously, because of all the media attention, even in Serbia as well. Of course, more groups are finding out. It's in NRS though. It's not necessarily a problem. It's a small minority with a very loud voice that are causing issues. You know, people that believe in Greater Serbia and so on. It's unfortunately, you know, we have people like that have pushed their the threats towards Verdis based off of those extremist views. But again, I think that a lot of those people who are part of nationalist groups, a lot of them are even just under 18. They'll be 14, 15 years old, and of course they'll be a bit radical until they grow up a little bit. When it comes to actual just general young people in Verdis, people that are like 18 to 28, I think they're predominantly quite supportive of Verdis. I think again it's just older and younger radicals that have caused an issue.
Most observers, though, still call Verdis an experiment rather than a state. How do you respond to critics who say this is more performance than policy?
I would say it's pretty obvious that it's not an experiment. We've tried to live on the land. We had a settlement there. We've opened an office. We're doing everything that a state does, even while in exile. I think as well, it's a way of, when it comes to the media and their push on, I've seen in a lot of like Instagram bios and such, where people are like, oh, Verdis, whether Verdis gets recognized or not, it's an extraordinary experiment. I think that's just copying, people just copying each other's paragraphs. I think that the more that people look closer into Verdis, they'll recognize that this isn't an experiment. This is a full-fledged, state that we have built.
One of the classic kind of definitions of the state is that the state holds a legitimate monopoly on the use of power, on violence. Say Verdis is to gain recognition. How do you go about that? How do you go about building a Verdisian state that essentially wields the monopoly on violence in order to keep order? How would you? What is the Verdisian plan of the government so far to establish, say, a police force? Dare I even say an armed forces? What would be the scope for security, both internal and external, of the Verdisian state were it to gain recognition?
Yeah, so when it comes to police and of course, just the internal justice for Verdis, of course, we plan to have our own police force that is state run. We don't plan to privatize anything like that. That in our eyes, that would just cause a lot of corruption. Of course, as time grows and as things get closer to us being back on the land, we will release more and more plans in regards to how Verdis's justice system will temporarily run until the new constitution is put in place. But we will make sure that authority, law enforcement is kept to police. We don't ever plan on giving citizens access to firearms and so on. I think that it's quite a concern to us because we're between two countries that haven't had the best relations, and the two ethnic groups, Croats and Serbs, are still quite tense to this day. And I think that given the region that we're in and the amount of issues that we've had, even with nationalist groups or radical groups, we know that we're going to potentially have a higher risk of terrorism, compared to other regions. So we don't want to be a police state or anything like that. But I think that for the months as the settlement is building up, we aim for security to be tighter than usual because we know that Verdis will have a bit of vulnerability. Then there's no way really around that. And of course, we want to prepare people for Verdis's law enforcement before we get back on the land. So that Verdis's justice system is running straight away. And when it comes to external defense, obviously we do have a defense force, but that's more a gendarmerie than anything. It's sort of like how Monaco has a military but relies off of France. It's not for anything offensive or anything like that, and it's not obvious. It's not going to obviously be able to fully protect Verdis from any foreign invaders. It's for internal reasons mainly, and ceremonial reasons. When it comes to actual defense of the state, large scale defense, we hope to potentially reach an agreement with one of our neighbors in the future to help protect us, just like again how Monaco has a military but relies off of France for full scale defense. We want the same model for Verdis.
So at the moment, Verdisian relations tend to be warmer with Serbia than Croatia, although unofficial in any capacity.
Mhm.
Say the situation arises that the gendarmerie of Verdis becomes aligned with Serbia. Does that not create a latent or an inherent vulnerability with a Croatia who feels kind of as though it's lost its land? As you mentioned earlier, Serbia is rather happy with how the island dispute has gone, whereas Croatia is the party who feels most aggrieved. Does that situation not create more vulnerability for such a small nascent state?
Yeah, I think the same issues goes for everywhere in the world. You know, police will always, every policeman will always have their own opinions on these matters. Obviously, when it comes to people, entering law enforcement in Verdis, we want to make sure that their views aren't seen as extremist, or obviously, if they do favor one side over the other, that's not their job to worry about. Their job is to maintain law enforcement in Verdis, sticking to what Verdis's laws will be in the future. Not creating their own or anything. And of course, we have the control on who has access to citizenship in Verdis. Obviously, people's views can change over time, but we make sure that people who are becoming citizens at the moment, they do align with Verdis's state values, and they do want to have good relations with Croatia as well. I think that our citizens are very much aware in regards to, while we do have good, somewhat positive relations with Serbia at the moment, we want the same for Croatia as well, and all other citizens want that too. A lot of citizens, we all love Croatia. We genuinely do. We think it's a beautiful country. We're just, again, while we're not happy with what they've done recently, we want to have as good relations with them as we do with Serbia in the future. We want to get along with both sides. It's, we don't want to lean towards the other or anything. This is, this will be written in laws to maintain that Verdis does not have a stance on either of those governments.
And enshrine neutrality. Brilliant. Well, I now want to just very quickly, our wonderful editor-in-chief, Maxime Zagrand, sent a very interesting question, which I'd like to just put forward to you before I ask my kind of final questions. And so Maxime asked, anarchists of all shades and council Democrats from Hannah Ardern to Kurdistan claim to have divined certain patterns for the sort of revolutionary outbreaks of political natality, such as the Free Republic of Verdis comprises. The former points to the ways in which the homeless organized remarkably communal and efficient societies and ex-military bases after the Second World War, or Orwell's Barcelona. And the latter points to what they see as the organic emergence of council democracies, instantiating public happiness and freedom everywhere from colonial America to Hungary 1956 to revolutionary Russia and the like. All of these experiences, if one reads the testimonials of the post-war homeless or watches documentaries on Kurdistan or reads Ardent, emphasize the phenomenological aspect, the physicality of being every day in the same place with the same people, doing something that has never been done before. But the Free Republic of Verdis, alas, has spent some years unmoored from home, and its people are dispersed worldwide. It should be the first example for these anarchists and council, and indeed many other traditions of democracy and freedom, of such public freedom and happiness occurring primarily digitally. Maxime wonders if President Jackson yourself has any reflections on how special the Free Republic of Verdis may well be for these and other great traditions of human emancipation, insofar as it may be proof that we needn't share our revolutionary life worlds for them to be revolutionary.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Well, it's very complicated and long question. So I'll try and answer it the best that I can. But I think when it comes to Verdis's values, I do see that those similarities. Of course, we're not anarchists or anything like that. We're not turning up and just setting up tents or anything. But we definitely are a country that's obviously operating in exile at the moment, and because we're in exile, so are all of our citizens. And it's quite interesting that many of our citizens have still maintained happiness and commitment towards staying and loyal to Verdis and wanting to get back on the land as soon as possible. And of course, these people have not come and go. They've stayed with us so far from the start, and hopefully towards us being back on the land as well. It's important to us to have really good relations with our citizens, and we are citizens of Verdis as well. The government is. So I hope that when it comes to us being back on the land, you know, a lot of these citizens who are currently in exile will join us back on the land as well.
Brilliant. If Croatia never budges, if access to Verdis remains blocked indefinitely, what is the plan B?
Well, to us, there isn't a plan B. Again, this is, you know, this is Verdis' territorial integrity. It is our sole commitment to make sure that it is protected. We believe that we will be back on the land sooner or later. We're in it for the long run. It could be tomorrow. It could be in 5 years. It could be in 20 years. I think that there will be us getting back on the land soon, but hopefully sooner than later. I think at worst, you know, when it comes to the blockade being lifted, it could be when younger Croatian politicians enter Croatian government, because they have shown to be much more lenient towards Verdis and much more open to the idea. There's a lot of benefits for Croatia recognizing Verdis, especially in Slavonia, which is the region that we border, which is statistically the poorest region in Croatia and doesn't get much tourism. We would effectively boost the use of their services there in their economy. So I think that when it comes to Verdis being the blockade being lifted, it's a matter of when, not if, and we don't want there to be any plan B, because again, this is Verdis that we're talking about. You know, we can't up and leave and go to another region. We can't give up Verdis's claim to the land. We will continue to operate, you know, no matter how long it takes. And this is what our citizens signed up for, and you know, we can't go off of that.
Brilliant. And I suppose kind of hidden in the question was kind of like a barbed implied sense of, say, would Verdis rather exhaust indefinitely the diplomatic legal routes before ever considering another form of asserting territorial claims?
Absolutely. You know, we want to make sure that we can do things as well as possible diplomatically with Croatia to get back on the land. We want to negotiate. We want to speak with them. We just hope that they will open this dialogue soon, because we're ready to come to the table. We will happily go to Croatia, sit down, talk. We want to reach compromises, something that will make them more comfortable with us. But that being said as well, we also don't want them to be in control of our policies. We want to make sure that Verdis can operate as a fully independent state, not under either of those countries' wings. We know that there'll be a lot of influence from them, of course. It's sort of unavoidable. But we want to make sure that they're comfortable with us. We want to make sure that we have a good, positive relation with them, and we want to do this as diplomatically as possible for the best outcome, even though it may take longer than other pathways.
And let us fast forward to 2030. What's your imagined Verdis? How big? How developed? What kind of economy? What kind of recognition?
Yeah, well, I think it's with it being such uncharted waters, it's sort of unpredictable where Verdis would be in 2030. My ideal view would be that by then Verdis would be much we would be back on the land way longer for a way longer time. By then, I would expect that Verdis would be internationally recognized, have a built-up economy, and of course, I hope by 2030 as well, that we would have a fully elected government. I think the infrastructure would still be up and coming. I think that it will take many years for Verdis to fully develop. But I hope that by then, Verdis will be recognized. But this is an optimistic view in my opinion, because while it's sort of unpredictable where Verdis could be, it could be again that Croatia just suddenly decides to lift the blockade tomorrow or communicate with us tomorrow. It could be that they decide to start communicating with us in 5 years, and we may still be in the situation that we are now. But we'll continue to do everything that we can to govern the country while in exile. We'll still maintain responsibility for our citizens. We'll still interact with the international community. We will continue to do everything that our government normally does, and hopefully explore other opportunities by then as well, if we haven't been back on the land. And when I mean exploring other opportunities, I mean, we'll still be communicating with other governments, and we'll be trying to improve the lives of our citizens while we're still operating in exile.
Brilliant. And kind of one last question before I hand over to you for any kind of final remarks. You've mentioned how close the relations are with Liberland, and Liberland is obviously within the same region, within the same kind of system. I wanted to know, to what extent could you see closer union, or do you see your paths as maybe interlinked now, but inherently kind of parallel to one another, or is closer relations a possibility? Has it been something that's been discussed, perhaps?
I think it's very obvious that while Verdis and Liberland are in the same situation, we're only 20 kilometers away from each other. We don't have the same views, and we're aware of that. You know, we want to have good relations with our neighbors. We don't agree with everything. Well, I don't personally agree with everything that Liberland's views are, but I think we when it comes to Liberland, we do plan to have good relations with them in the future. We never plan to have a union or anything. That's not really on the books, because again, I think Verdis's and Liberland's views are very, very different, especially in regards to how each country plans to be governed in the future. But I think that there's definitely, you know, more and more collaboration that can build, and you know, we want to build up that collaboration, because we do, while we don't share the same views, we do get along well, especially in the situation that both of us are in right now.
Now, finally, Daniel, what message would you want listeners across Europe to take away about Verdis right now?
Well, I would say to listeners, you know, help us. We have a lot of work to do. We really need your support. This is something that's never really been done before in history in the way, well, at least in the 21st century, in the way that it's being done now, especially with the digital world and everything existing. Come get involved if you have some skills, especially around infrastructure, medical, anything like that. It's really important for us to make sure that we bring in demand skills. So if you think that you can be part of building history, come join us. We want to have a well-developed country, and we need as many in demand skills to be filled as possible.
Daniel Jackson, President of the Free Republic of Verdis, thank you for speaking with Europinion again. It's been very, very insightful. And so, yes, so ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Europinion. Our guest today, Daniel Jackson, the 20-year-old founder and president of the self-declared Free Republic of Verdis. Whether you see Verdis as an audacious diplomatic experiment or a glimpse into the future of micro-sovereignty in Eastern Europe and beyond, it raises enduring questions about what makes a country, land, law, or simply belief. For more interviews and analysis, please visit Europinion. I've been your host, Will Kingston Cox, and on behalf of Europinion, thank you to you, the audience, for watching. Thank you and goodbye.